Have you ever stayed at a hotel that made you not want to go back? Not because the bed was hard, or the AC was loud, or the food was bad, but because of something else. Something off. Most of us have spent at least one night in a hotel far from home. Maybe for work, maybe for a quick trip, maybe because plans changed last minute and there was nowhere else to go. These are spaces that look the same, smell the same, feel the same. White walls, thick curtains. Quiet hallways, that consistent hum of climate control. We walk into them without thinking, drop our bags, kick off our shoes, and trust that whatever was here before us is gone. We trust that when the front desk hands us the key, the room behind the door is a blank slate. But the truth is it's never really blank, not completely. You're about to hear 4 stories. They're not ghost stories. No one's screaming, no one's floating. And there's no creepy child laughter in the hallway. These are real accounts sent in by people who stayed in ordinary hotel rooms until they realized they weren't alone, not in the usual way, not because of someone they could see, but because the room itself was holding on to something. Something that didn't leave when the last guest checked out. I'm not trying to scare you, I just want you to listen. Pay attention to the little things, a sound, a smell, something out of place. Because in all 4 stories you'll hear nothing jumps out, nothing attacks, but something lingers, and for the people involved that was enough. The first story comes from a man named Matt. He's a mechanical engineer from Iowa. A few months ago, he was sent on a quick solo assignment, a one-night job to inspect equipment at a manufacturing plant on the edge of a small town near the state border. Nothing fancy. He just needed a clean room, hot water, a good night's sleep. He didn't even plan to unpack. The town only had a few lodging options, and when he called ahead, one place had availability. He didn't care about the name. He booked it. He arrived late in the day, a little after 6. The sun was already low. It was that time of year when the sky turns gray by late afternoon and the wind never really stops blowing. The hotel was a squat, 3-story building next to an empty gas station. The lobby had faded carpet and an overused lemon-scented air freshener that clung to the walls like dust. But it was fine. The woman at the front desk spoke softly, wore reading glasses on a chain, and barely looked up as she told him, "Only room left is 403, top floor, end of the hall." He took the key without a second thought. It was the old kind, a real metal key, not a plastic card. That stood out to him for a second, then he let it go. The 3rd floor hallway was long and empty. Dim yellow bulbs ran down the center, and the floor creaked under the carpet. When he reached room 403, he slid the key into the lock. The door stuck for half a second, then opened with a low groan. The room itself looked normal: queen bed, wooden desk, small TV, beige carpet, basic bathroom to the left. Nothing luxurious, but nothing wrong. He dropped his backpack on the chair, hung his coat on the back of the door, and went to wash up. That's when he saw it. Just beneath the edge of the bed, close to the floor, there was a dark patch. Maybe the size of his palm, not black, just darker than the carpet, like something had spilled and dried there. He bent down for a closer look. No smell, no moisture, just a faint stain with blurry edges. Could be coffee, could be anything. He grabbed a wet wipe from his bag and scrubbed at it. The stain didn't come off. He pressed harder, still nothing. He shrugged, probably old, probably harmless. He sat at the desk, opened his laptop, and started going through emails. Outside, the wind picked up. The window rattled once, then stopped. He checked the lock on the door just in case, then went back to work. Around 8, he headed out to grab dinner, walked a few blocks, ate quickly, and came back. He showered, changed into a t-shirt, then lay on the bed and flipped through channels. Local news, weather forecast, nothing interesting. But then something caught his attention, not on TV, in the room. The stain, it was bigger, just slightly. But enough that he noticed, enough to make him pause. He stared at it from the bed. Did he imagine that? Maybe the lighting made it look different. Maybe it always looked like that and he just hadn't noticed. But now once it was in his mind, he couldn't stop seeing it. He sat up, walked over again, and knelt next to it, pressed his fingers to the carpet. Still dry, still no smell, but definitely larger. He reached for another wipe, tried again. It didn't even smell. It was like the color itself had changed, like the fibers had absorbed it so long ago that it was part of the carpet now. He stood, locked the door, turned off the light, and got in bed, but the thought was there, hovering. What kind of stain grows overnight, or changes shape without being touched? And why did it feel like it was still changing even as he lay there with his eyes closed? Matt didn't sleep well that night. And when he woke up the next morning, the first thing he did was look at the floor. The stain was even bigger. Matt didn't tell the front desk, not that morning, not when he checked out. He just wanted to leave. He dropped the room key off at the counter. The same woman from last night barely looked up. No one asked how his stay was. No one asked if he needed help with bags. He walked out with his backpack, got in the car, and drove away, but the image stayed with him. He tried to forget it. At first, it worked. A week went by, then two. He got busy with other work. New job sites, new hotel rooms, more emails, more windshield time. But one night, at another roadside motel, he found himself checking under the bed. Not for stains, just checking. Then he did it again at the next place, and the next. A month later, he booked a 2-night stay in a mid-range hotel downtown for a regional conference. Nothing fancy, but cleaner, newer. Room 215, fresh sheets, white walls. LED lights that flickered slightly when turned on, but it was fine. He didn't think about the other room, not at first. But on the second night, after coming back from dinner, he noticed something strange. Not a stain. This time it was the air. As soon as he walked in, it felt warmer than before. He adjusted the thermostat, still warm. Then he noticed a faint smell, not bad, just out of place, like old tea, slightly sour. He couldn't place it. He opened the window. Let in some air, turned on the fan. It faded, but not completely. That night he had trouble sleeping, not because of noise. The room was quiet, but something about the way the shadows moved across the walls kept pulling his attention. Like headlights from the street were casting shapes that didn't match any car. The next morning, when he bent down to plug in his charger near the nightstand, he saw something under the bed, something dark. His heart skipped, but when he looked closer, it wasn't a stain, just the shadow of his own backpack tucked underneath. He exhaled, almost laughed at himself. But then he realized something. He never put the backpack under the bed. He always left it near the desk, always. He pulled it out, checked inside, nothing missing, zippers still closed. But for the rest of that trip, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in the room. Not in a breaking and entering kind of way, just been there, that night. He dreamed of the first hotel, room 403. In the dream, he stood in the doorway looking at the bed. The room was empty, lights off. But the stain on the floor was glowing, very faint, like it had heat. When he woke up, his shirt was damp with sweat, and his legs were still curled like he'd been trying to stay away from something. Since then, Matt's habits have changed. Every time he checks into a new room, he walks in slow. He scans the carpet, checks the corners. He doesn't care if the front desk notices. He doesn't care if people think it's weird, because now he knows something he didn't know before. Rooms don't always reset when a guest checks out. Some of them keep things, not big things, not dramatic things, just traces, shadows, impressions. And sometimes you don't even notice them until they start moving around. Matt never went back to that first hotel. He doesn't even remember the name. But he remembers the room, 403, the shape of the bed, the feel of the carpet, the way the air got still at night. Like it was waiting for something or someone. And even now, when he's traveling for work, he sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night and checks the floor, just to be sure. Josh and Amanda were both exhausted when they checked into the motel that night. They had just finished a 5-hour drive after a friend's wedding and were halfway through a long road trip back home. It was late fall, that in-between season where the wind never stops and every small town starts to feel like it's closing down for the year. They didn't plan to stay in this town. They were hoping to push through to the next city, but a flat tire on the highway threw everything off. By the time it was patched up and back on the road, it was dark, freezing, and neither of them felt like driving any further. The motel was the first place with lights on. 2 floors, faded signage, and a small front office with vending machines and an old man watching the news with the volume too high. The room they got was nothing special. It smelled faintly of bleach, the kind that doesn't fully mask the underlying scent of age and moisture. The bed was soft in the middle. Bathroom light flickered a little and the carpet was rough underfoot, but it was warm, it was quiet, and they were too tired to be picky. They showered, ate some leftover snacks from the car, then got in bed. Amanda passed out quickly. Josh stayed up for a bit, scrolling on his phone, answering a few work messages before plugging it in and setting his alarm. At 2:17 in the morning, they both woke up to a knock. 3 slow, steady knocks on the door, not loud, not aggressive. Just deliberate. Josh sat up first. Amanda turned toward him, eyes wide but silent. Neither of them spoke. They listened. Nothing followed, no footsteps. No voices. Josh reached for his phone and checked the time. 2:17 a.m. He waited, still nothing. After about a minute, he got out of bed and approached the door. The peephole showed nothing. Just the empty hallway, dimly lit by a single wall light at the far end. He didn't open the door. Just stood there for a while listening, then went back to bed. The next morning, neither of them mentioned it until they were already on the road again. Amanda asked if he thought maybe someone knocked on the wrong door. Josh said maybe. He didn't sound convinced, but they let it go. There was no real reason to dwell on it. No one was outside when he checked. Could have been anything. 2 weeks later, they were on the road again. Different route, different town. They stopped at another small motel, the kind that offers free parking, a microwave in every room, and a generic breakfast bar with cereal and cold toast. That night, it was just the two of them and one other car in the parking lot. They checked in, showered, and went to sleep early. The heater in this room worked better, the bed was firmer, and they finally felt like they were getting proper rest. Until 2:17 a.m., 3 knocks, same rhythm, same pause. Same strange silence afterward. Josh sat up immediately. Amanda was already awake. This time she whispered, "You heard that too." He nodded. They both got out of bed. He checked the door again. No one, nothing. Hallway empty. The next day they asked the front desk about it. The clerk was a young woman wearing earbuds. She shrugged. "We don't have cameras on the second floor," she said. "You're sure it was your door?" Josh didn't respond. Amanda thanked her and they left. They tried not to think too hard about it. Coincidences happen. Weird people exist. Maybe someone was messing with them. Maybe it was just two unrelated events. But from that point on, every time they booked a room, they checked the time before bed. Not because they expected it, but because they wanted to be sure. And over time, they stopped staying at small motels altogether. That third time, they didn't speak when it happened, not right away. The knock came again, 3 firm, evenly spaced taps at exactly 2:17 a.m. Josh had already been half awake. Amanda sat up the moment she heard it. By now it was no longer surprising, but somehow it felt heavier, more personal. Josh walked to the door, slower this time, opened the peephole, nothing, again. But this time he opened the door, just a crack, just enough to peek out. Still. No one, hallway empty. The light at the end flickered slightly, the way cheap bulbs do when they've been left on too long. He stood there, holding the knob, half expecting to see someone appear from around the corner. But the hallway stayed silent. Amanda whispered, "Shut it." He did, locked the deadbolt. Then they sat in bed together for a while, not saying anything. Josh checked the time again, 2:20. That number would stick with him, the feeling of waiting for something to return. By morning they had decided, no more late-night motels, no more sketchy stops. They started booking chain hotels only, places with cameras, front desks open all night, double locks, and long hallways filled with other guests. But even that didn't change the way they felt around 2 a.m. Every night they stayed in a hotel after that. One of them would wake up, even without knocking, just out of habit, out of memory, on one trip. Josh decided to try something. He placed a chair up against the door before bed, tilted so that if it moved, it would fall. Amanda thought it was silly, but she let him do it. That night nothing happened. The chair stayed in place. No knocks, no noise, but he still woke up at 2:16, stared at the door and waited. It became part of the routine. Check in, double lock, chair under the knob, wake up, wait. Eventually they stopped traveling as much. Settled into a rhythm back home. The memory of the knocks faded, not completely, but enough to go days, then weeks, without thinking about them. Until one night, back at home, Amanda jolted awake. The bedroom was quiet. Josh was still asleep. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. She held her breath. No sound, no knocks, just the low hum of the ceiling fan. She lay back down, trying to calm her thoughts. But the next morning, when Josh went to take out the trash, he noticed something strange. 3 small scuff marks on the front door, right at eye level, as if someone had tapped on it with a knuckle or the edge of something blunt. Not scratches, just marks. He didn't say anything to Amanda, just wiped them away and tried to forget. It could have been anything. They both kept telling themselves that, and maybe they were right. But still, every once in a while, one of them wakes up, checks the clock, and stares at the door just to be sure. 2:17 a.m., always that time. Brian never paid much attention to hotel bathrooms. To him, they were just practical, a place to shower, shave, brush your teeth, then move on. He traveled often for work, staying in mid-range hotels across the Midwest. Clean rooms, soft beds, free breakfast, nothing fancy. He didn't care much for the details. As long as the shower had pressure and the towels weren't damp, he was fine. So when he checked into a business hotel just outside Chicago, he barely gave the room a glance. It looked like every other place he'd stayed. Neutral colors, wall-mounted TV, desk by the window, and the familiar smell of overly fresh linens mixed with HVAC dust. The bathroom was typical white tile, single sink, full-length mirror, and a light that flickered once when turned on. But something about that mirror would end up sticking with him. Not at first. The first night was uneventful. He ordered takeout, watched half a movie, then fell asleep with the TV still on. In the morning, he got up early as usual, turned on the bathroom light, washed his face, brushed his teeth. When he looked up at the mirror, something felt off. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe the lighting, maybe the angle, but he didn't think too much about it. It wasn't until the next morning that he noticed it again. This time, it was more than a feeling. He had just finished shaving and was checking the time. He looked at his phone on the counter, 7:42 a.m. He glanced at the wall clock above the sink, but there was none, just the mirror, and then he saw it. In the mirror's reflection, the screen of his phone showed a different time, 7:37 a.m. He turned around, picked up the phone, looked at the screen. 7:42, looked back at the mirror. 7:37. He held the phone up, compared it directly with what the mirror was showing. The reflection lagged by exactly 5 minutes. That didn't make sense. Mirrors don't delay, they don't buffer. It wasn't a screen, it was glass, just glass. He leaned in, rubbed his fingers across the surface. Solid, real. He waved his hand. The reflection followed instantly. So why did the phone screen show the wrong time in the mirror? He turned off the screen, turned it back on. Time jumped back to match. He blinked. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was a glitch. But for the rest of that morning, he kept checking the mirror. Every time he passed by it, he glanced, expecting to see something off. But everything seemed normal again. The next day, it happened again. Same moment. Same process. He walked in, phone on the counter, glanced at the mirror, and again, the time in the reflection was exactly 5 minutes behind. He checked multiple times, moved the phone to a different angle, still 5 minutes off. The strangest part, it only happened in the morning. In the evening, the reflection was fine, matched perfectly. But come morning, that mirror showed the past, just 5 minutes, but exact. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't want to sound crazy. And honestly, it wasn't a big deal. It was just strange, more curious than threatening. But each day he found himself testing it more. He'd set the phone to a stopwatch mode, watch the seconds tick up, compare the mirror's version. And there it was, 5 minutes behind, second by second. Then at night, back to normal. Like the mirror was only off when the sun came up. On the 5th day, he decided to film it, just to prove it to himself. He set up his phone on the sink counter, started recording video toward the mirror. He walked away, came back 10 minutes later, watched the clip. The mirror showed the correct time, perfectly matched. He tried again, same result. He gave up, but that night he dreamed he was standing in front of the mirror again, not his reflection, but him physically, as if he were trapped inside. The Brian in the mirror was 5 minutes behind, frozen mid-movement. When he reached out to touch the glass, the reflection blinked and didn't match his eyes. He woke up with a dry mouth and a pounding heart. He didn't dream about it again. But every hotel he stayed in afterward, he checked the mirror first thing. And if the reflection ever lagged, even for a second, he would leave the room. So far, that hasn't happened again. But he never forgot that hotel outside Chicago. And he never looked at hotel mirrors quite the same way again. On his last day at the hotel, Brian woke up earlier than usual. He hadn't set an alarm. He just opened his eyes, checked his phone, 6:42 a.m. It was still dark out, with that quiet stillness only early mornings seem to have. The heater clicked softly near the window. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, staring at the bathroom door, half expecting to see the mirror glowing or humming or something, but there was nothing, just silence. He walked in slowly, turned on the light, and placed his phone down on the counter again. He waited a moment, then checked the time. The phone read 6:45. He looked into the mirror. The phone in the reflection said 6:40. He didn't feel surprised this time, just tired, almost like the mirror was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, exactly what it had done all week. But something was different. The rest of the reflection was moving slower, too, not lagging by minutes, not frozen. Just slightly off, a half-second delay in the way his arm reached up to rub his eyes. A slight hesitation in how his shoulders shifted when he sighed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't something anyone else would have noticed. But he did, because by now he was looking for it. He waved. The reflection waved back just a hair too late. He leaned in, staring at his own eyes, blinked. The reflection blinked after. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, breathing, staring, trying to understand what he was actually seeing. Was it him? Was it lighting? Was he overtired and imagining all of it? There was no proof. He tried filming it again, but as soon as the camera was pointed at the mirror, the delay disappeared, perfectly in sync. He started packing that morning without turning back toward the bathroom, kept his eyes on his suitcase, rolled up his socks, folded his shirts, unplugged his charger, zipped everything tight. When he finally looked up again, the mirror was just a mirror. His reflection matched, no delay, no odd time difference. He checked out quietly, gave a polite nod to the front desk staff, and walked into the cold air outside. The sky was still gray, the parking lot empty. As he pulled out of the hotel and back onto the highway, he looked once in the rearview mirror. Just for a second, everything behind him looked normal, still for the rest of that week. He caught himself glancing at mirrors, not for vanity, not for routine, but to confirm that what he saw matched what he did. To confirm that he was where he thought he was. He mentioned the experience once, months later, over dinner with an old friend. Told it like a strange story, one of those weird things on the road you share between drinks. His friend laughed, said something like, "Man, maybe the mirror just wanted a few extra minutes of sleep." Brian smiled, nodded, didn't press it. But even now, he avoids staying at hotels with full-length mirrors directly across from the bed. He prefers rooms where the bathroom door can stay shut through the night, and he always checks the time twice, just to be sure. Chloe was 26 when she took a job as a front desk assistant at a mid-tier highway hotel in northern Arizona. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than retail and came with decent benefits. The hotel itself sat between two gas stations just off the main interstate, a 3-story building with stucco walls, a faded red awning, and a parking lot that was always half full but never busy. Most of the guests were business travelers, road trippers, or families passing through on their way to somewhere more interesting. Chloe worked the morning shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and she liked it that way. It was quiet, predictable, and rarely involved real problems. Her main tasks included checking guests in and out, preparing invoice summaries, answering the occasional call about the Wi-Fi password, and logging lost and found items when housekeeping turned something in. That last part wasn't usually exciting. Most people left behind socks, chargers, or half-used shampoo bottles, but room 208 was different. The first time something odd happened with that room, Chloe didn't think twice about it. Housekeeping found a single leather glove folded neatly on the dresser. Not dirty, not worn out, just one glove. It wasn't winter. No one claimed it. She logged it in the binder and put it in the lost and found drawer behind the desk. A week later, another item turned up in the same room, a paperback novel placed upright on the nightstand, with no name, no hotel bookmark, and no guest asking for it back. She added it to the drawer. Then came the toothbrush in its original packaging, then a single earring, then an unopened envelope with nothing written on it, sealed but light enough to feel empty. All from room 208, all left behind, deliberately or not. But always strange in some quiet way. It wasn't the quantity that bothered her, it was the pacing. These items didn't show up all at once, but spaced out, each one arriving after a new guest had stayed there. Chloe started paying attention to the room's reservation log. The guests were normal, traveling salespeople, older couples, solo drivers. No one ever called back to claim anything. Nothing ever showed signs of a mistake. Like items dropped by accident or stuffed under the bed, they were always placed somewhere visible, neat, as if someone wanted them to be found. She mentioned it once to her manager, a man named Frank who had worked there for over a decade. He shrugged and said, "Every room has its quirks. You see patterns when you're bored." She didn't argue, maybe he was right, but it kept happening. One week it was a ceramic keychain with no key. The next, a Polaroid photo of a flower bed, no people, no writing, just a close-up of dirt and yellow petals. Chloe stopped putting them all in the drawer. Some she kept in a small box in her backpack just to see if there was a pattern. She never found one. One morning, she came in early and noticed something different. Housekeeping hadn't finished yet, but the door to room 208 was already open. That was unusual. Usually the cleaning staff didn't leave rooms unattended. She knocked gently on the doorframe and called out. No answer. She stepped inside. The room was clean, bed made, lights off. But sitting on the center of the pillow was a small plastic toy, the kind you get from a vending machine, a red frog. Its paint was chipped around the eyes, and its legs were slightly bent inward. She picked it up, turned it in her hand. No branding, no weight, just plastic. That day she didn't log it. She took it home and placed it on her nightstand. That night she had a dream about room 208. Nothing dramatic, just her standing inside it, looking around as if waiting for someone to explain something. The room in the dream looked exactly like it did in real life, same wallpaper, same brown curtains, same hum of the AC unit, except in the dream. The bedside drawer was slightly open and she could see the edge of something inside. She reached for it, then woke up. She didn't think much of it. She'd been spending more time than usual thinking about that room anyway. It made sense that it would show up in her dreams, but still, something about the toy frog kept bothering her. It didn't belong, not in the way that other things like a glove or a book could be explained away. This felt placed. She brought it back to work the next day, quietly put it into the lost and found box, and didn't speak of it again. But from that day forward, whenever she passed room 208, she found herself slowing down, listening for something. Not a noise, just a shift, a sense, like the room was watching. A few weeks later, Chloe started noticing something else. Room 208 wasn't just where strange items were left behind. It was also the room guests seemed to comment on the least. She checked reviews on the hotel's booking platform, scanned handwritten feedback cards, even read through internal guest satisfaction forms. Room 204 had reviews mentioning loud HVAC. Room 210 had 2 complaints about hallway noise. Room 208, almost nothing, just a handful of one-line comments like everything was fine or no problems. Not bad, but oddly empty. She checked the guest log again. Most guests only stayed there once. No repeat visitors, no long stays, no upgrades requested. It was a through point, a stopover, nothing more. One Friday morning, housekeeping turned in another item. This time, it was a white note card, completely blank on both sides. Resting on the nightstand when they entered the room, Chloe held it up to the light, checked for impressions, watermarks, anything. Nothing. It was pristine. She asked the housekeeper if the guest had looked unusual. The woman shook her head, didn't even see them. Key was dropped off early. That day, Chloe asked her manager if she could shadow housekeeping for an hour. Frank raised an eyebrow, but agreed. She followed one of the cleaners floor to floor, helping strip beds, collect towels. Wipe down counters. It was all normal, routine. When they got to room 208, Chloe stepped in first. The room was freshly vacated, smelled faintly of aftershave and citrus air freshener. The blinds were open, sunlight flooding the beige walls. Chloe moved slowly, eyes scanning everything. Nothing seemed out of place until she opened the mini fridge. Inside was a plastic grocery bag. She pulled it out carefully. Inside were 3 items, a banana. Still yellow but soft to the touch, a small tube of travel toothpaste, and a single playing card, the 8 of spades. She said nothing, just logged it, placed the bag in the drawer, and continued with the shift. That night she told her sister about it over the phone, framed it like a harmless curiosity. Some rooms collect dust, she joked. Ours collects forgotten weirdness. Her sister laughed. Sounds like you're living in a Twilight Zone episode. Chloe laughed too. But that night when she lay in bed, she thought again about the 8 of spades. Why that card? Why a banana? Was it just coincidence? Did someone mean to leave it? A week later, Chloe got a call at the front desk. A man's voice, calm, polite, asking if room 208 was available for a walk-in reservation. She checked. It was. As she started to confirm the details, the man interrupted. Actually, never mind. Sorry, wrong location. Then he hung up. No one showed up that night. But the next morning, housekeeping found a pair of sunglasses on the windowsill of room 208. The room had been empty. Chloe didn't log it. She stopped logging anything after that. Instead, she took the items home, lined them up in a shoebox, the glove, the toy frog, the banana sticker she peeled off, the blank note card, the 8 of spades. She never showed them to anyone, never posted online, never brought it up again to Frank or her co-workers. But every now and then she'd take the box out, open the lid, and look. Not because she was scared, but because she didn't know why it made her feel strangely calm. Like someone or something had been trying to communicate, not with noise, not with words, just with quiet, careful placement. That was 2 years ago. Chloe doesn't work at the hotel anymore, but sometimes when she drives past that stretch of interstate, she glances toward the off-ramp, looks for the red awning, and wonders if room 208 is still there, and whether it's still collecting things. Jason had always been a night owl. He worked late, ate late, drove late, and checked into hotels when most people were already asleep. That night was no different. He'd been driving for hours through the central part of Oregon after a long day of meetings, and when his eyes started to blur and the freeway signs became harder to read, he decided it was time to pull over. He wasn't picky. As long as the place looked reasonably safe and had a working shower, he was good. He spotted a hotel just off the highway with a dim, blinking vacancy sign. It was one of those older business hotels, flat, rectangular, and tucked between a row of chain restaurants and a tire center. He walked into the lobby just before midnight. The receptionist barely looked up, handed him a room key, and slid a small bottled water across the counter. "Room 324, she said. "End of the hall, elevator to your left." Jason thanked her and made his way up. The hallway smelled faintly like old carpet cleaner and something else he couldn't place, maybe industrial soap. He didn't think much of it. He was too tired to care. The room looked fine. Neutral walls, heavy curtains, dark carpet with a floral pattern, and a bed that sagged slightly in the middle. He threw his bag down, kicked off his shoes, and opened the small window by the desk to let in some fresh air. It barely budged. He gave up and turned on the AC instead. Then he took a quick shower, brushed his teeth, and flopped onto the bed with a soft grunt. That's when he noticed it, the chair. There was an armchair in the corner, angled strangely, not quite facing the TV, not quite facing the bed. It was pointed more toward the door. Jason found it odd, but not alarming. Hotels always had weird furniture setups. Maybe someone dragged it there, and housekeeping never moved it back. He ignored it and turned on the TV, static. He flipped a few channels before settling on some old movie playing at low volume. He was asleep within 15 minutes. He woke up around 3:40 a.m. not from a noise, but from a feeling, that heavy, uneasy kind of alertness that doesn't come with dreams. He sat up slowly and looked around. The room was quiet. The TV had turned off by itself. The AC hummed in the background. Then he saw the chair again. Still there, still angled toward the door, but something about it now looked different, like it had moved. He couldn't say for sure, maybe just the light. He stared at it for a moment, rubbed his eyes, and laid back down. No sounds, no movement, but sleep didn't come easily after that. In the morning, Jason packed up his things and gave the chair one last glance before leaving. When he passed the front desk, he casually asked, "Hey, is someone supposed to come in at night to check rooms?" The receptionist shook her head. "No, sir, why?" "No reason," Jason replied and walked out. A week later, on another trip through the area, Jason found himself back near the same highway. He didn't plan on staying at the same hotel, but a storm was moving in and he figured, why not? This time he checked in earlier around 9 p.m. Same lobby, same clerk, same tired voice. "Room 324 again," she said. Jason paused. What are the odds?" She didn't answer, just slid him the key. When he entered the room, it looked identical to how he remembered it, except the chair was now gone. He looked in the corner where it had been, then turned a slow circle to scan the room. No chair, no armchair anywhere, just a small desk chair by the window. He opened the closet, nothing, checked the hallway, nothing. He even walked back to the lobby and asked casually, "Hey, did you guys remove some furniture from 324? The clerk blinked at him. "No, not recently." He nodded, forced a smile, and headed back upstairs. That night he couldn't sleep, not because of noise, but because he kept expecting to see that chair again, like it might show up. Just be there again like before, waiting, quiet, slightly turned toward the door. But it never did, and somehow that made him more uneasy than if it had. Jason left the hotel the next morning with a strange restlessness he couldn't shake. He didn't feel scared exactly, nothing had happened. No knocks on the door, no cold breeze, no flickering lights, just a missing chair in a quiet room that looked too familiar. Still, something about it unsettled him. The next few weeks he didn't think about it much. Work picked up, travel became hectic again. And the strangeness of that room faded into the background like a dream you forget halfway through breakfast. Then late one Thursday he had to pass through the same stretch of highway again, and almost without thinking he took the same exit. He wasn't planning on staying there, he just found himself pulling into the parking lot. The sign was still blinking, still dim, still open. He parked but didn't go in, just sat there in the car for a while, engine off. Headlights catching the edge of the building. Then he stepped out and walked to the lobby. Same front desk, same tired carpet, but a different clerk this time, a younger guy with glasses who greeted him with a small nod. Jason asked, "Room 324 available tonight?" The clerk checked. "Actually it is, you've stayed with us before." "Yeah, couple of times," Jason said. He got the key and headed up. The hallway hadn't changed. same lighting, same carpet. But when he reached the door, he hesitated. Not long, just enough to notice he was hesitating. He unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was exactly the same. Bed in the middle, desk by the window, dresser with a flat-screen TV. But this time the chair was back, same one, slightly worn upholstery, arms curved gently, positioned just a few feet from the door, angled, not directly at the bed, not directly at the TV, but once again facing the door. Jason stood still, hands still on the doorknob. He hadn't said the room number aloud when he checked in. Hadn't requested the chair, yet here it was, back where it had been the first time, like it had never been gone. He dropped his bag and walked slowly toward it, stopped a foot away, reached out and touched the top. It felt solid, dustless, as if someone had just placed it there earlier that day. He pulled the chair away from the door and pushed it to the side, not dramatically. Just enough to say, "I see you, but you're not in charge here." Then he turned on the TV, laid on the bed, and left the lights on. That night, he woke up again. Same feeling as before, not a noise, not a nightmare, just a weird kind of awareness. He blinked at the ceiling for a second before his eyes shifted toward the corner of the room. The chair was back in its original spot, facing the door. He hadn't heard it move, hadn't felt anything, but there it was, quiet, still, back where it always seemed to want to be. Jason sat up, looked around, no sound, no shadow, just the low hum of the AC. He got out of bed slowly. Walked over to the chair again and stood there. Waiting, he didn't move it this time, didn't touch it. Just watched it for a long moment as if expecting something to happen. Nothing did. The next morning he went down to check out. The younger clerk was there again. Jason asked casually, "That room, 324, anyone else ever mention the chair in the corner?" The guy paused, then smiled nervously. "Honestly, yeah, people ask about it every now and then. Sometimes it's not there, sometimes it is. Depends who you ask. One guy swore he moved it to the hallway before going to sleep. Found it back inside in the morning." Jason gave a dry laugh, "So it's not just me." The clerk shrugged. "Old hotel, old furniture, things shift around sometimes." Jason nodded, thanked him, and stepped outside. As he pulled his car out of the lot, he took one last glance up toward the third floor. One of the windows had the curtain drawn just slightly open. He couldn't be sure, but he thought he saw something dark near the edge of the glass. Maybe the edge of a chair. He didn't stop, he didn't come back. But sometimes when he checks into new hotels now, he'll look around the room a little longer than before. And if there's a chair sitting a little too close to the door, facing just slightly the wrong way, he'll move it without thinking. And he'll always wake up once during the night, just to check. Elliot checked into the hotel sometime after 10 p.m. He was exhausted from a delayed flight and an hour-long ride share with a driver who refused to stop talking. He barely registered the lobby Daker, just handed over his ID and credit card, nodded at the front desk clerk's explanation of breakfast hours, and took the elevator to the 4th floor, room 419. He remembered it because it was the same number as his apartment back in college. Small detail, but enough to stick. The hallway was quiet, dimly lit. Carpet smelled faintly like lemon-scented cleaning spray. He slid the key card in, waited for the green light, and stepped inside. Standard layout, queen bed, desk, TV, a chair near the window, and that generic abstract art hotels love to hang above the headboard. He kicked off his shoes, dropped his backpack on the floor, and immediately went to brush his teeth. Afterward. He collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, not bothering to set an alarm. He just needed sleep. Somewhere around 2:30 a.m., Elliot woke up to the sound of the door handle clicking. He froze. The sound was unmistakable, metal turning, then a soft push. His heart jumped. He sat up halfway and saw the door creak open just a few inches. Light from the hallway spilled in. A man's voice followed. "Oh, sorry, thought this was mine." The door closed, quiet. Elliot sat still for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone was drunk and mixed up their room. It happens, but wasn't the door supposed to lock automatically? He got up, walked to the door, and double-checked the deadbolt. It wasn't engaged. Only the latch had caught, which must have allowed the door to open slightly when the guy used his keycard. Elliot locked it properly this time, engaged the latch too, and got back into bed. But he didn't fall asleep right away. Something about the man's tone, it hadn't sounded drunk or confused. It had sounded casual, too casual, like he wasn't surprised to see someone there. In the morning, Elliot mentioned it to the front desk as he checked out. "Just a heads up," he said, not complaining. "Some guy opened my door in the middle of the night," he explained. The clerk looked puzzled. "What room?" 419, Elliot said. She typed something quickly. Strange, she muttered. That room wasn't double booked. No one else should have had a key to it. Elliot frowned. Well, someone clearly did. I heard the door unlock and open. She apologized, promised to inform management, and offered him a discount. Elliot didn't push it. He had a flight to catch. A week later, he was back in town again. Different conference, different meetings, same hotel. This time he got room 403. No strange keycard incidents, but just before falling asleep that night, he remembered to double lock everything. The memory of that quiet voice at 2:30 a.m. was still lingering. 2 months passed, then another trip. He was booked into the same hotel by his office assistant, this time. Room 419 again. Elliot hesitated at the desk, asked if there were any other rooms. Fully booked, the clerk said. We can move you tomorrow if anything opens up. Elliot forced a smile, took the key, and headed up. The room looked exactly the same. Same painting, same furniture, same faint citrus smell. He stood by the door a little longer than usual before finally locking it, deadbolt and latch. Then he placed a pair of sneakers against the door as an extra precaution, just something to trip over if anyone tried again. He fell asleep around midnight. At exactly 2:31 a.m., the door handle clicked. At exactly 2:31 a.m., the door handle clicked. Elliot's eyes opened instantly. He hadn't been fully asleep, more like drifting, but that sound snapped him into full awareness. He didn't move, just stared at the ceiling, barely breathing. The latch held just like before, but the handle definitely turned. Soft, slow, like someone testing it, not barging in. There was no voice this time, no apology, no accidental guest realizing their mistake, just silence. Then footsteps, not rushing, just a steady walk down the hallway, fading gradually. Elliot sat up, heart pounding. He reached for his phone and checked the time again, 2:32 a.m. He slipped out of bed, grabbed the hotel robe from the hook, and went to the door, listened, nothing. He opened it cautiously and looked both ways. The hallway was empty, carpet quiet, light humming from the overheads. He walked slowly to the elevator, saw no one. Then turned and glanced toward the stairwell at the far end. The door was closing. Back inside, he didn't sleep again. He kept the lights on and sat in the armchair with his laptop open, pretending to scroll news articles while his ears strained for any sound. At 5:30 a.m. he checked out. The same desk clerk as the night before was still on shift, or maybe just starting. Elliot leaned on the counter and said, "This is going to sound strange, but someone tried to get into my room again last night. 419. The clerk looked up, alert. Did you see them? No, Elliot said. Just heard the handle. Same time as last time, 2:30 in the morning. The guy typed something, frowned, and said, "Sir, just so you know, our keycard system logs every entry, even failed ones. We can check." "Please do," Elliot said. The clerk nodded and disappeared into a back office. A few minutes later, he returned. "There was no keycard activity on your room between midnight and 6 a.m., he said. "Only your initial entry last night at 9:14 p.m. Elliot stared at him. So how did the handle turn? The clerk hesitated. Could someone have tried from the outside without a card, just testing it? Maybe, Elliot said, but if so, it happened twice now. Same room, same time of night. The clerk didn't have an answer. Just promised to escalate it to management and offered a complimentary voucher for a future stay. Elliot didn't take it. Back home, he thought about the two incidents more than he liked to admit. He replayed them in his head, searching for a logical explanation. Hotel error, miscommunication, prank. But none of it felt right. He called a friend who worked in IT security and asked if hotel keycard systems could be spoofed. Technically, yeah, his friend said, but that's rare and you'd have to know what room you're targeting. It's not something people just do for fun. Elliot didn't like that answer. A few months passed without incident. He traveled for work, stayed at other hotels, avoided that particular chain when he could. Then, during a busy convention season, the same hotel was the only one with open rooms. He gave in, booked a room, but this time not 419. He requested a lower floor, got 204, slept fine, no issues, no strange clicks in the night. It almost made him think he'd imagined the whole thing. Almost, but about a year later. He was reading local news while waiting at the airport and saw a headline that made him stop cold. Man arrested for unauthorized access to hotel rooms using stolen master keycard. The article didn't name the hotel, but it mentioned a chain, a location, and buried in the paragraph, a case involving repeated late-night attempts on the same room, always around 2:30 a.m. The suspect had worked as temporary night staff, rotated through various properties, and had figured out how to copy a master keycard before leaving the job. He targeted quiet travelers, solo guests. Elliot didn't finish the article. He just sat there for a while, breathing slowly, staring at nothing. He never stayed in room 419 again, and now whenever he checks into a hotel, he tests the lock 3 times, places something against the door, and always sets an alarm for 2:30 a.m. just in case someone out there still has a key. Mia was traveling for a small business conference just outside Milwaukee. It wasn't glamorous, just a mid-tier hotel with beige hallways, outdated elevators, and the kind of continental breakfast that makes you miss airport food. But it was close to the venue and had decent Wi-Fi. She checked in on a Wednesday evening, got her key card, and rode the elevator to the 6th floor. Room 614. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels padded. Like the walls were absorbing every sound. She swiped the card, pushed the door open, and was surprised to find the lights already on. Just the small entry lamp near the bathroom, but still, it was unusual. She stood there a second before stepping in. The room was neat, bed made, remote on the nightstand, and 2 towels folded perfectly on the edge of the bathroom counter. Maybe housekeeping had just finished and forgot to switch the lights off. No big deal. She closed the door and went about unpacking. The evening was uneventful. She ordered takeout, answered emails, and FaceTimed her roommate back home before going to bed around 11 p.m. She slept well. The next morning, she placed the Do Not Disturb sign on the doorknob before leaving for the conference, as she always did. She didn't like strangers in her room, not even hotel staff. Her laptop, charger, and a few client folders were laid out on the desk. And while nothing was super confidential, she still felt better knowing no one would enter. She came back around 5 p.m., tired but satisfied with how the day had gone. The door looked untouched, signs still hanging, but when she walked in, the air felt different, cooler, not AC cold, just recently disturbed, like someone had opened the door not long ago. She immediately scanned the room. Nothing obvious was missing or moved, but when she walked into the bathroom, she noticed one of the folded towels was now hanging on the hook behind the door. She was almost certain she hadn't done that. She rarely used the bathroom hooks, and she hadn't even showered that morning. A small thing, but enough to make her pause. Maybe housekeeping came in anyway, but the sign was there, and the bed hadn't been remade. She called the front desk to ask if housekeeping had entered 614. The woman checked. Nope, not on our list. You had the D&D sign out, right? Yeah, Mia said, still hanging on the door. Then no one should have entered, the woman confirmed. I can have someone come up and check if you'd like. Mia declined. She was probably just tired. Maybe she moved the towel and forgot. It had been a long week. That night she double-checked the locks. Deadbolt, latch, everything, just in case. She set her suitcase upright against the door like a wedge, not because she was scared, but because she didn't want to feel that unease again. At around 2:00 a.m., she woke up needing water. She sat up groggily, reached for the plastic cup on the nightstand, and noticed something strange. The Do Not Disturb sign was now resting on the small table near the door, inside. She stared at it for a long moment, trying to convince herself she'd brought it in earlier without realizing. But she hadn't. She remembered leaving it outside when she got back. It was still on the knob when she closed the door. She was sure of it. She stood up and checked the door again, locked, latch in place, suitcase unmoved. Then how? She didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, Mia left the hotel earlier than planned. She didn't say anything at the front desk. What could she say? Someone might have entered her room despite the door being locked, despite the sign outside. Or maybe she was just imagining things. That's what she told herself as she checked out and drove to the final day of the conference. But something kept bothering her, the placement of the sign. It hadn't just fallen, it was on the table, in her suitcase. The one she had wedged against the door, it hadn't moved. That meant the door hadn't opened fully. So how did it get inside? Back home a few days later, she mentioned the story casually to her roommate, expecting her to say something like you were tired or housekeeping made a mistake. But instead, her roommate asked, are you sure no one was already in the room when you got there? That question landed harder than Mia expected. She hadn't thought of that. The lights were already on when she first checked in. What if someone had a key? What if someone had been hiding somewhere, closet, bathroom, under the bed, and had waited for her to leave in the morning, but there was no sign of theft, no noise, no confrontation. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling. Out of curiosity, she called the hotel a week later, not to complain, but to ask a question. She pretended to be planning another stay and asked if room 614 was available. The person on the phone said yes. Then she asked, was that room occupied last week from Wednesday to Friday? There was a pause. The woman on the line replied, I'm sorry, I don't have that data on hand. Why do you ask? Mia just thanked her and hung up. Something about the hesitation in that response bothered her. She looked up reviews of the hotel online and found mostly average feedback, clean, affordable, basic. But in the middle of the second page, she found a short review from 2 years ago. It said, stayed in room 614. Weird vibe, came back from dinner one night and the TV was on. I know I turned it off. D&D sign was inside the room, probably nothing, but still. No response from management. No other reviews mentioned that room. She didn't tell anyone else the full story. She didn't want to sound paranoid, but the next time she traveled, she did a few things differently. She took pictures of the room when she arrived, checked closets and behind the curtains, never used the same hotel chain again. And always left something in front of the door, her suitcase, a chair, her shoes, just something that would let her know if the door had opened. A few months later, she was in another hotel in another state, different city, different room number, but the same routine. And as she was leaving her room to head to a client meeting, she grabbed the Do Not Disturb sign and looked at it a little longer than usual before hanging it on the outside knob. Then she paused. She wrote a tiny mark on the bottom corner of it with a pen, barely visible, something only she would notice. When she came back 6 hours later, the sign was still there, but the mark was gone. She didn't sleep in that room again. Andrew was staying at a small roadside hotel in Nebraska, just off the interstate. He wasn't there for anything special, just driving cross-country to visit his brother, stopping wherever he got tired. It was one of those long, quiet stretches of highway where towns get smaller and distances feel longer. The hotel wasn't much. 2 floors, outdoor entrances, faded signs, but it was clean, cheap, and had vacancy. He checked in around 8:00 p.m. Got room 112, first floor. The clerk was friendly enough, a woman in her 50s with a raspy voice and a name tag that said Marla. She handed him the key card and pointed down the row. All the way at the end, she said. Right next to the supply room, it's quiet. That suited him fine. Room 112 was exactly what he expected. Beige walls, a stiff mattress, buzzing fridge in the corner. One window facing the parking lot. Blinds slightly bent at the bottom. But the first thing he noticed, right after setting his bag down, was the door on the far wall. A connecting door, you know, the kind double-locked on both sides, intended for families or group bookings. But this one looked older than the rest of the room. Scratched paint, mismatched knob. The lock was just a deadbolt. No chain, no bar. Andrew tested it. It clicked shut, but something about it didn't feel sturdy. Door didn't sit flush in the frame. There was a faint draft coming through the bottom, nothing major, just enough to make him notice. He turned on the TV, flipped through channels, scrolled his phone. Around 9:30 p.m., he went to brush his teeth and changed into a t-shirt and gym shorts. When he came out of the bathroom, he paused. The connecting door looked different, nothing obvious, just slightly more open, not unlocked, just shifted, angled inward a bit. He walked over and checked it again, still locked, still shut, probably just his imagination. He shoved his duffel bag against it, not because he was scared, but because it gave him peace of mind. He didn't even think about it again until around midnight. He had just turned off the lights and crawled into bed when he heard something. A knock, not loud, not aggressive, just 2 soft taps on the connecting door. Then silence. Andrew lay there completely still, staring at the dark ceiling. Maybe it was a pipe, maybe the fridge clicked weird. But a minute later it happened again, 2 soft knocks. He sat up, heart already racing. The bag was still against the door. Couldn't see anything from the bed, so he got up, walked slowly to the door and listened. Nothing. He considered saying something, hello, or wrong room, but stopped himself. Instead, he crouched down and looked through the tiny gap at the bottom of the door. All he could see was a faint slice of carpet from the other side, but he thought he saw something move, just a slight shift of shadow. He stood back up and said, loud enough to be heard but not aggressive, this room's occupied. Silence, then after about 5 seconds, footsteps, light, slow, walking away, then nothing. Andrew waited a few minutes before pushing a chair against the door too. Not exactly Fort Knox, but it helped. He stayed awake longer than he planned, watching late-night infomercials on mute and checking the time every 10 minutes. Eventually, he dozed off. In the morning, he got dressed, grabbed his bag, and opened the door to the parking lot. But before leaving, something made him stop and look back at the connecting door one last time. The deadbolt was still turned, chair still in place. But now, under the door, there was something tucked just barely through the crack. A folded piece of paper. He bent down, pulled it out. It was blank, no writing, just a torn square from a notepad folded once. No message, no name, no explanation, just enough to make his skin crawl. He left without saying a word to the front desk. Andrew didn't stop driving until he was 3 hours out of Nebraska. He kept thinking about the folded paper, not what was written on it, because there was nothing but the fact that it was there at all. Someone on the other side of that door, quiet enough to go unnoticed, patient enough to wait until morning, and deliberate enough to leave something behind. But why blank? What did it mean? He considered calling the hotel to ask if they could check the room next door. But what would he even say? Someone slid me a blank piece of paper last night. He knew how that would sound. He figured maybe the person had mistaken the room, or maybe it was just some stupid prank. That's what he told himself until a few nights later when he checked into a new hotel in Wyoming, this time in a busy area, nicer place, multiple floors, indoor hallways, no connecting doors. Still, as soon as he entered the room, he walked the perimeter. Checked the locks, looked under the bed, just routine, he thought, out of habit. But even in a safer setting, he couldn't relax. That folded paper stuck in his mind like a splinter. 2 weeks later, he got curious. He went online and looked up the hotel in Nebraska. Reviews were average, nothing too alarming, but then he filtered for the word connecting. Only a few results popped up. One caught his eye. It read, "Stayed in room 114. Heard knocking through the connecting door around midnight. No response when I called out, told the front desk. They said the room next door was unoccupied." That was posted 8 months ago. Another review, even older, mentioned a man trying the handle on our connecting door more than once during the night. Andrew's stomach sank. It wasn't just him. He thought about calling the hotel again, or the police even, just to report something suspicious. But again, what would he say? There was no proof of anything illegal. No entry, no threat, no injury, just something wasn't right. The part that bothered him most was the silence. Whoever was on the other side of that door didn't want to be known. No words, no apology, just presence, intent. Later that month, while helping his brother move furniture, Andrew noticed something odd in his overnight bag. A notepad, the kind you find in hotel desk drawers. He didn't remember packing it. It must have ended up in there when he was grabbing his stuff in a rush. He flipped through it idly. Most of the pages were blank. But about 5 or 6 in, there was a page torn in the exact same way as the one he found under the door. Jagged edge, bottom corner missing. He held it up next to the folded piece he had saved. It matched, same notepad, same paper, meaning someone in the room next door had used the hotel notepad to slide that blank square under the door. Meaning they had time to sit, rip a page, and fold it carefully. Meaning they were right there, awake, watching. Andrew stopped staying at motels altogether after that. Paid extra for hotels with interior corridors, security cams, and no connecting doors. On the rare occasion he had to stay somewhere simpler, he would always ask for a corner room. Just one door, one wall shared, and no adjoining anything. He never heard another knock like that again. But every once in a while, late at night, if he was in a quiet room and the AC clicked off just right, he'd think he heard 2 soft taps behind the wall, and he'd wonder if someone else, somewhere, was still sitting quietly on the other side of a thin door, waiting for the right time to slide nothing at all beneath it, just to see who noticed.